Many of you know the most important chapter in my personal story. That when I was 18 years old and actively practicing a series of poor life decisions, my story nearly came to an end. After a very bad car accident, I ended up in the hospital, broken in every way, in a medically induced coma, with a chance of living in the single digits. Friends and family were invited to come pay what was expected to be their final visit. True story. Good news, I made it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the one person who clapped for that one. And eventually, finally, that second chance materialized in the form of clarity and purpose, and almost a sense of urgency to do something of greater meaning. Now, wouldn't it be nice if every one of our clients had that type of clarity of purpose that tends to be common in the case of a near-death life experience, something transformational like that? Would it be nice if our clients had that clarity of vision? Good. Yeah, thank you. The answer is yes. Enter George Kinder. Kinder is the Harvard-trained economist turned philosopher turned CPA. He managed to evolve his tax practice into a comprehensive financial advisory offering with supporting methodology, while on the successful path to also becoming a spiritual teacher and author based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Hana, Hawaii. Not bad. Within the advisory community, George is universally known as the architect of a powerful practice simply known as life planning, through a method he'll be sharing with us this morning called EVOKE. Now, to many advisors, his work is seminal, the much-needed missing link between life and money. But to be fair, however, some advisors likely envision Kinder hovering on a magic carpet playing the ukulele. I think it's possible. Just a little too out there for the mainstream, perhaps, for mainstream consumption and practical application. And perhaps fairly so. As legend has it, after receiving his degree at Harvard, George stuck around for a few years to study the field of gravitational physics and the space-time continuum. So he might be the only one in here qualified to have a conversation with Bill Nye. That, I don't understand. Gravitational physics, at all. But Kinder has made it his life's work to help us understand our clients better. And here's the best part. My experience has been that understanding I've derived from studying with George hasn't just made me a better advisor. Indeed, the EVOKE mindset has also given me the ability to better serve my spouse, my kids, my firm, and my colleagues, and my community. Now, would you please help me welcome George Kinder?
So I promise you I'm not going to say a word about gravitational physics. All right? All right. It's great to be here and humbling to follow Bill Nye. Really exciting to listen backstage to all of his stories. I will touch a bit. I think that some of my work follows on some of the things he's trying to do. I'm often thought of as a visionary in the field, and my latest work is about civilization. So I'm going to touch on that just a little bit at the end, and a little bit on this practice known as mindfulness that has gotten so much scientific credibility over the last decade or so. But I want to say, first of all, I'm so happy to be here. I've wanted to connect with you, with BAM, for years. And so I'm really thrilled that Tim finally figured that out, or somebody did. And what an introduction. I hope I can live up to what he had to say. But it's great to be here. I've been in my work as a financial advisor, which ended 20 years ago, but I invested much the same way that you folks do. And I started as an accountant. I won the bronze medal on the CPA exam in Massachusetts some Gosh, I don't think you want to know how many years ago, but I think it was something like 45 years. So things have changed. And what I've dedicated most of my professional life to is what Tim was describing as life planning. Really starting in the field as kind of a hard-nosed, tax advisor for people, and realizing that if I really listened to the client, that something different happened, both in my relationship that made it richer for me, but also meant that I was much more attuned to what the deductions were for the client, right? And then so I carried this work over to the financial world and invented this aspect of financial planning called life planning that's now in nearly 30 countries. So we're going to talk about this and with some thought about the commoditization of investment advice right now. And I think one of the things that life planning offers to you is a way of actually adding value that's extraordinary, that will never be captured by robo-advice. So let's see, where's my clicker here? Always got to see if it works. So these are 3 points that I wanted to just start with. And they're themes that are going to go throughout the talk. The first is just an awareness of trust level for advisors, for financial advisors. I think we all are aware of it. If you're not, because your practice is so strong and because BAM is so strong, that's possible. But if all the surveys put trust levels for financial advisors at somewhere in the low teens, compared to nurses who are up in the 70s, 80s, or 90s. So I want to keep that in mind as we move forward because, of course, it's one of the factors that leads to commoditization actually having appeal to the advisor. So one of the things we're going to be looking at is how do we build those trust levels. The second question, issue that I want you to just notice as we go through the talk today is this question of risk. And it's a really simple question. We analyze portfolios for risk all the time. And I'm going to come back and look at analyzing the portfolios that you use, but in the context of life planning. So the question that I ask is I want to broaden our thought about risk, is how much risk are you willing to take with someone you don't trust? If you don't trust somebody, how much risk are you willing to take with that person? None, okay? So imagine, the issue that the consumer has coming into financial advisor anywhere. It's a significant issue. And one of the themes of the studies is that the trust level is very low for financial advisors in general, but clients tend to trust the advisor that they've got, right? So that's what studies show. Well, how thin is that trust likely to be if, in fact, there's this general huge sense of distrust? So we're going to talk about risk in relation to trust. And another thought, we talk a lot, you guys are so sophisticated around concepts like efficient markets, but how can you have an efficient market if trust levels are extremely low in financial advice? How is that possible? And then the final concept that I'm going to be weaving through the talk is this question about fiduciary and the notion that to be a fiduciary, we must put our client's interest first. And the common way that we think about it is just how we do business, that we're not selling product. And we're very thoughtful and presenting an evidence-based system that people can understand. And that's part of the answer, I think. But I think it cuts short what a client's interests actually are. One of the things that you'll find that I argue is that you can't be a fiduciary without being a life planner. Because without really dedicating yourself to what it is that the client wants, which is their own dream of freedom, whatever it is, and really having the relationship quality that the client is eager and interested to share with you all of the aspects of what their dreams are, how can you possibly claim that you put your client's interest first? So that's going to be, those are themes that are going to weave through this conversation. Life planning is the system that we use, and we're going to go to EVOKE, which is the specific system that Tim mentioned a minute ago, in just a minute. But I want to contrast for a moment for you the value of life planning for you as an advisor and as a business owner to the value to the client. Because the value, and we're going to look at this value throughout the talk today. But to the advisor, it's a highly structured, what EVOKE is a highly structured, client-centered interview process with measurable deliverables at the end of every stage, right? It's a very, very efficient process. It's a process. But to the client, and particularly in the first conversation with a client, it's the conversation of a lifetime. There's so many times when I walk a new client to the door, to my office door, at the end of a meeting, where the client stops me and says, you know, if that wasn't the best conversation, it's certainly one of the best conversations I've ever had. And I'm sitting there and there's a smile. I may be sharing some of the smile, but some of it's kind of in the back of my mind that I'm not going to share, because the truth is, in that first conversation, I hardly said a thing. It wasn't a conversation at all. It's really all about listening. You're going to, if you know anything about life planning, you probably think it's about goal setting, and we'll talk about that as well. But really, the real secret to it is in listening. And the nature of the conversation, what is the nature of a conversation that is the conversation of a lifetime, right? Think about a dinner party conversation or a cocktail party conversation where you meet someone and they look at you and they say, I've just been to Tuscany. And you look back at them and go, oh, did you see Montalcino? Did you go to Montalcino? Did you find their wines? And they respond to you, well, no, I saw it on the map, but you know, we went elsewhere. My daughters took some really incredible pictures. Would you like to see them? And then the conversation turns to daughters, or maybe it turns to the kind of camera that someone uses. And so this conversation that feels very delightful is like a ping pong ball going back and forth between people. And you think that's a great conversation. Is it the conversation of a lifetime? No. Because, why?
Because it's back and forth versus...
Exactly, because it's back and forth versus the person just talking and unweaving, unraveling the layers of meaning in their life and their aspirations, what they really want, who they really are. That's the conversation of a lifetime. So it involves, life planning involves kind of a training in this quality of listening and drawing out from the client what is the most meaningful thing. You know, I think that every new client that comes into our office, there are a couple of things going on that we don't think about all the time. The first is that every new client coming into our office is anxious. They're a new client. They don't know who you are. They don't know whether you'll listen or not. They don't know, the quality of the relationship. They're anxious, and it's natural. But we don't think a lot about kind of the emotional tone that's going on. If we did, we'd, I think, be even better at setting the stage for them to feel comfortable. The other thing that is there for most of the clients that come in is whether they've been talking with their spouse in the background before they come in the car ride coming in, or as they're brushing their teeth in the morning, and they're talking about what they hope will happen in the meeting. And sometimes a spouse won't even reveal to their partner what they hope will happen in the meeting. But very often there's something that I call either a secret sorrow or a secret aspiration that is somehow tied to money. And they're hoping, as they come in to see you for their first meeting, that they'll be able to get to that secret aspiration or that secret sorrow. And what happens the way we conduct our meetings is we go pretty quickly to spreadsheets and what we do and all of that. In life planning, we turn the meeting entirely over to the client. So we give them the opportunity of just exploring and sharing and starting off superficial and testing us to see if they can go to what is most meaningful and most deep. A typical advisor will interrupt that conversation and ask a question, well, what do you want to do in retirement? You know, or something like that. Every interruption gives a message to the client that it's not your meeting, it's my meeting, this is my office. Okay, so we're going to conduct this conversation my way. You can usually recover from one interruption. You can't recover from two. The client will not get to that secret sorrow or that secret aspiration that they've longed to share with you. And there's a moment of, it's amazing inside the client, there'll be a moment of relief. Whew, dodge that bullet. I don't have to share that, because obviously it's a little nerve-wracking to share something that personal. But also there's a kind of a despair and a recognition that, this is just another advisor. Not really listening to me, not really interested in who I am. I'm going to skip a slide and come back to this slide. I'm going to skip to the EVOKE slide so that we know just what is life planning. So life planning, the way I think of life planning is that it's delivering a client into their dream of freedom, really. Fundamentally, it's what it is. And we'll show you the process of how that works. And it's delivering them in relatively short order. In terms of the structure of meetings, what you do right now, the primary stuff that you do right now is in the knowledge and the execution phase of this acronym, which we call EVOKE. The knowledge and execution is the structuring of the financial plan. It's the structuring of the assets. It's all the stuff that you do in financial advice and in financial planning. The initial piece that you normally do with data gathering will be your version of exploration, vision, and obstacles. So what we do is we expand those three elements out of the normal data gathering that you do. And instead of it being on a questionnaire, kind of a fill in the blanks kind of thing, and then you question the client around the questionnaire, in exploration, we just open the meeting to the client. Why are you here? Well, yeah, I know you want your 401k taken care of, but if we were to work for a while together, what would you like to be the outcome? What would you like to happen? Oh, wonderful. You want your kids educated? Anything else? There's a lot of pausing. There's a lot of turning the conversation back to the client and asking them in ways that show that you're really interested. Gestures, you're staying in tune with the emotions, really following the feelings. So where there's a moment where you can tell there's a little bit of anxiety, there's some empathy or some softness inside of you, some kindness. Or where you see a secret aspiration, you go, wow, boy, that sounds exciting. Tell me, no, you wouldn't say tell me more, just that sounds exciting. And then the client will fill it in. Because the minute you ask them something like tell me more, it's your meeting, not theirs. And you don't know where they're actually going. And you want them to have that free flow. So that's, in the first meeting, it's really 90%. The client, maybe the last half hour was when I would share for all that I'd learned from the dimensional approach. And my passion in those days was letting them know that there wouldn't be a 1929 style collapse, that I had protections in place, or the portfolio was structured in a way to protect against that. But that's the last half hour. The bulk of the meeting is the client, just really sharing, so that it becomes the conversation of a lifetime for them as they end that meeting. The second meeting, the V for vision, so in EVOKE it's the V, is probably what I'm most known for, a series of exercises that where we do, and the client does them, they might do them at home or they might do them in the office. Different advisors have different approaches to it. But rather than being primarily kind of listening, now we've got data that we're working with. And this data is what they tell you is most exciting, most meaningful, most important to them. We'll go through one of the exercises in a moment. I'll give you a chance to kind of ponder it for a moment. But there are several exercises we use. We typically use 3 or 4 exercises. One of them that I love is called Ideal Day, Ideal Week, Ideal Year. And so we ask the client to, if you were able to live your ideal day every day, what would it look like? And what about the ideal week? Would you work, 5 days, 6 days a week? Would you work 4 days, 3 days a week? What's the ideal week look like? And then the ideal year, what does that look like? We, as life planners, we're not going to be able to give them all of those ideals. But one of the things we're going to be able to do at the vision meeting is pepper a few of them in. Like maybe what would be really meaningful for them is getting home at 3 o'clock so that they can walk their child home from school. Maybe they'd love to do that on Fridays. And we'll find a way to put that into the plan. So what we're looking for in life planning is something that at the end of this meeting it just sets the client on fire. They are so excited at what it looks like their life is going to be as a consequence of coming in to see you. So yeah, the investments are still there, all the financial planning work is still there, but their life is coming alive, and you've done it. You've made it happen. And they know that you will also provide all the financial elements as well. So the third meeting is the obstacles meeting, and this is the other meeting that maybe you don't do as much of. The obstacles meeting, so at the end of the vision meeting, we will do something called lighting the torch, where we'll actually ask the client if as a consequence of the work we've done, I or we were to deliver this to you, and then we show them what the vision is. And that's when they're quite astonished. They leave with so much excitement, but also there's some anxiety there, as you might imagine, because transitions are anxious, filled with anxiety, and there's doubt that might come up. I mean, after all, they haven't been able to do this all the years of their life, even though they might have had these secret aspirations or these sorrows that they've wanted to address. And you're saying, no, let's make it happen. Let's do it. So what we do between the vision and the obstacles meeting is we suggest that they not dwell on the obstacles, but they live into the dream and promise them that the next meeting will deal with the obstacles. Well, by the time they come into the next meeting, they are so sold on the vision that they've bought into, their life plan, that they've solved an awful lot of those obstacles. And when we ask them, what are the obstacles? Often they just say, well, it's only me. It's very simple. It's only me. And occasionally they are money and time. Well, that's your field, money. And time is very related to it. As Ben Franklin told us, time is money. But the obstacles are not something we solve. It's not something you must feel responsible for. It's something, if you're doing more work than the client, you ain't doing life planning. Okay? So we toss it back to the client. I can think of many ways of getting you that experience that you want, but you're the master of your life. Tell me what you would do. How would you solve this? So we are more facilitating the client figuring out for themselves how to deliver this vision of their life that they long to have. So that's the EVOKE process. What I'd like to do, well, let me just show you some of the skills. I think you're getting some of them. So what we do traditionally as financial advisors is we ask a lot and we solve a lot. And what we don't realize that we're doing is that we're shutting down, judging, and squelching. It's like the client themselves might say, I'd really like to write a book, but I don't think I'm going to have the time until I get to retirement. And you go, yeah, that's probably true, right? and there they are. But that telling you that they really would like to write a book is a hint at where the torch is, at where they would come alive. And when they come alive in life planning, they become much more energized and efficient all throughout their life because of that vitality and no longer living under the cloud of, I can't do it. So they do enough of that to themselves, and we should be cursed in some way for adding to their judging of themselves. So what we really emphasize more than anything else is the pauses. So giving the client the opportunity to kind of feel and think. We emphasize listening, as I mentioned. And we always follow the feeling. So at that slightest hint, we'll empathize, we'll endorse the writing of the novel. And in fact, we'll move toward inspiration. We will see that that's where they want to move with inspiration. And that's what we would encourage them to do. So what I would like to do, how many of you are familiar with what are called the 3 questions in the life planning model? So a handful, a bit more than a handful of you. So it's what I'm known for. And if you read any articles, and hundreds of them out there, and they're all over the world, you can find them anywhere, but I'm almost always quoted on the 3 questions. So I'm going to share them with you now. And they're questions that are meant to be deeply reflective. And at first they're light and easy and kind of fun and winning the lottery or going to Disneyland or something like that, but they move quite quickly into depth. And they're meant to be answered in order by a client. I'll often send them home for the client to do them as homework for the second meeting. But many advisors that I train love to do them in person, in the meeting itself. And I do that. I have done that many times as well. So if you would, take a moment, and if you've got a pen and paper, jot down your first response. Often I just give 5 or 10 minutes to someone to answer these questions. And your first response in just a minute is likely to touch pretty close to what your life plan might evolve. So the first question, I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's basically the money question. And it's if you had all the money that you needed for the rest of your life. You know, maybe you're not as rich as Bezos or Buffett or the Queen of England, but you've got all the money you need for the rest of your life. The question is, what would you do? What would shift? How would you live your life? You have all that freedom that comes from the accumulation of assets. What would you do? And you can see that's a bit like winning the lottery. The second question goes deeper, intentionally, because what we want to do in life planning is fulfill what is most profound for the client and what would provide the most energy for the client. So the second question begins to move in that direction. And this time what happens is that you're going in for a normal checkup with the doctor, and the doctor's been running some tests, and you're not expecting anything, and the doctor shocks you with the news that you have a rare disease. There's some good news with it, and that is that you'll feel as healthy as you feel right now for the rest of your life. But of course, the bad news is you only have 5 to 10 years left to live. And you know you'll make 5, you don't know if you'll make the 10th. So you don't know in that 5-year time frame when the moment of death will occur. So now the question is the same question. What would you do? What would you do differently? How would you shift what you're doing right now? I mean, there's a number of you who say, I just go on the way I am, but there'll be a number of you that have a real priority shift coming from reflecting on this question. And it's shifting toward, generally, what's more important to you. 5 to 10 years left, that's it. What would you do? How would you live your life? What changes? So you can see we're moving deeper. Believe it or not, we're going to even go deeper and more challenging than this question. So the third question, and all of our clients do these 3 questions, all of the clients. The third question starts off the same as the second, but it's really different. It starts off that you go to the doctor and you're feeling perfectly healthy. The doctor's been running some tests. Same beginning. This time the doctor stuns you with the confession that they have they failed to diagnose an ailment that you've had. And that ailment has come to term. And you have 24 hours left to live. So the question is not, what would you do with that 24 hours? I don't want to know that. What I do want to know is, as you reflect on your life and you reflect on the dreams that you'd had going forward for what you were going to do, what did you miss? Got 24 hours left, and that's it. What did you miss in all those dreams? Who did you not get to be? What did you not get to do? There's a handful of people in an audience this size who would have trouble answering that third question, but most of you would answer it. And for most of us, it's in the answer to that third question that the life plan is actually born, because that's what's most important to us. That's what we care about most. That's the legacy question. So, as you might imagine, so far nobody's got, I wish I'd structured my portfolio better as part of the answer. Rarely you get something about life insurance, but very, very rarely. So all the stuff we do, it's not there. So this is a very different approach to financial planning. I want to deliver them this life. And what I've thought of as being the important thing, all the finances, that's just to support this life of this person who wants to come alive and do something extraordinary in the world. That's what I want to support, is their dream of freedom and to make it happen. And that's what powers life planning. That's why people in life planning are so excited about what they do. So what comes out of this, here are some sample third question responses. I didn't get to visit Africa. One of my clients said, I didn't get to live in Africa. And that was a really interesting client. She wanted to live full time in Africa. And so what we designed was something where she spent a 6-week vacation and then a 3-month vacation and then tried 6 months and then eventually moved. And after the 3-month time in Africa, she loved it. It changed her life. But she realized that she wanted to be in America. So it's like we give our clients, a lot of what we do is we're giving our clients permission to dream and to begin to live into those dreams. And a lot of what the value of life planning is permission. So an authentic relationship, I've seen all of these things in my work with clients over the years. An authentic relationship with my 6-year-old son. So I remember that situation very well. It happened in one of the first trainings that we gave with one of the top advisors, financial planners in America. And what we offered him was roughly 10 hours a week to actually heal that relationship, to make that relationship really strong. And as you might imagine, taking 10 hours from your work, you think, oh gosh, can I do it? And this fellow was working for an insurance company, but a very good planner, extraordinary planner. And he was nervous that they would kick him out, they'd fire him. But I knew they wouldn't. We still had to have a plan B just in case, right? Because this was what he wanted. Do you want an authentic relationship with your 6-year-old son, or do you want life as it's been? You got a choice. Which are you going to choose? And that's we do this trick with 2 hands in life planning quite often to give the person the opportunity. So what happened was he took those 10 extra hours, and his work was so much more productive. He produced more in 40 hours a week than he had in 50 hours a week, basically, for the company. So, and that's typically what happens. There's so much energy that's delivered from this. So you see a loving relationship with my wife, act in an independent film, truly successful business, entrepreneurial, and incomplete relationship with my dad. These are typical. There are many versions of these that happen. And what we do in life planning is we also promise kind of the fulfillment of the dream in relatively short order. Usually, the promise that we make in what we call lighting the torch is that we'll accomplish this work within a year and a half. It's always within a month to 3 years, that time frame. And very often there was another famous financial planner, one of the heads of the FPA, who came through our programs, and he wanted a ranch. And he'd always thought it would be 10 or 15 years out, probably realistically 15. And we promised it to him within a year, year and a half. And within, I think, 10 days of his leaving the work that we did with him, he'd put down money on the ranch. So things move forward rapidly when there's passion and there's the support of financial architecture behind it. The thing that we've been lacking mostly in the profession recently is capturing that passion, is noticing where it is and realizing that that's a tremendous ally for the client as well as for us. So how do we tap into that? Now, the other thing that I love about all this is nobody but financial advisors really can deliver this stuff. You know, therapists help, coaches can help. Who knows the money? You know, and where are the excuses? The dominant excuses are, I can't afford it. So we have this incredible profession. You'll see that I've titled this slide Entrepreneurial Spirit. I'm a huge believer in entrepreneurial energy. And I think it's what life planning unleashes. In fact, I think that if we life planned everybody in America and everybody in the world, we would have far higher levels of entrepreneurial activity, of innovation, of growth, all across the world than we're seeing right now. We think of this as a rapid growth, well, maybe not, but relatively over the last 250 years, I think it could be far more rapid with just the addition of the passion from the grassroots of individuals. But where's that entrepreneurial spirit going to be spent? Family. I mean, shouldn't it be spent in family, among other things? Rather than just squirreled away in venture capital and private equity kind of factories or machines. Let's get that energy rolling through all of civilization. So these are the 5 things, I call them the 5 pursuits. These are the 5 major areas that people come up with. Family's by far the largest, but it's not exclusively so. There are clients where family will not be the number one thing. Where values or spirit or something explicitly religious will be, that's the second most common response. Third most common is creativity. And creativity can be acting in independent film, or it can be writing the great American novel, or it can be entrepreneurial around business, really creating a unique business. Community is very common. It's the only one we're kind of trained in. You know, we're trained that in philanthropy we give back. But in fact, it's far down the list in terms of when we see what people want to do coming out of the third question. The top 3 are much stronger than community. But community is important. And then the 5th most common one is actually the environment, and whether it has to do with climate change or whether it has to do with, I live in the city and I'd really like to spend more time in the country. So it's more about a sense of place as well as environment. So these are the primary things we see. So this brings up the question of risk. I promised you that I'd come back to this question. Let's look at risk, because I think that the way that we are taught to analyze risk in financial services is really tiny compared to how it is meant to be. It's really short-sighted in many ways. So this next example will give you a flavor of that. So what's the greatest risk? When I started my work way, way back, many decades ago, in financial advice and largely in investments, I thought a 1929 size market crash. So that's a big risk. I don't want my clients to face that. And so that was one of the things, one of the bells and whistles I would have at the end of my exploration meeting. So what is the greatest risk that a client faces? Is it a 1929 size market crash? Or is it the financial plan not in place? You know, as financial planning came into the foreground in regard to risk, financial planners began to argue, no, it's much more important to have the whole financial plan in place than just guard against the 1929 style collapse. Because what would happen if you have a terrible estate plan, or if you don't have the insurance that you need? Okay, so they began to shift this notion of risk to the financial plan not in place. You can see the third answer there. What's the greatest risk that all of us face? Is it a 1929 size market crash? Is it the financial plan not being in place? It's not living into our dream. It's not living into who we feel we are meant to be. It's not living into our authenticity. It's not delivering who we are into the world. Your client knows that. And that's the reason that a strictly by the numbers approach won't really work for them. You're not building the trust that you could be building. Client not living into their dream. So if that's the greatest risk, I mean, one of the things that happens is that if you haven't addressed it, the client acts out at some point and takes you by surprise. Like one of my clients who had this very lucrative medical profession life and suddenly revealed that he wanted to be a rabbi, much lower income. I've had other clients who've said, I want to sail around the world for the rest of my life, suddenly, out of the blue. So are we prepared for that? And that's, again, one of the things life planning does is it gives us all of that information. And in fact, we've launched the person already into the dream that they want. So let's think about how we think about risk in portfolios for a moment around all of this. So if you have a portfolio, let's make it really simple. There's half the portfolio up here and half down here. I can't quite do it with my hand. But let's say we take this top half of the portfolio and we reduce the risk in that top half to 0. How would that be? How would that be? Would that be good? Half. Half good. Absolutely 0 risk in half the portfolio. How would that be? I don't know about you, but it would be incredible. I mean, because if you have absolutely 0 risk, 0 volatility, man, you can increase the risk in the rest of that portfolio and deliver a much greater rate of return. So this is just basic, dimensional stuff. So let's add another element here. Let's say you were able to reduce the risk on half that portfolio to 0, and that same half, you were able to dramatically increase your rate of return. Now what's happening? How's that for you? That'd be pretty incredible, wouldn't it? Would you have a competitive edge against every other advisor out there? You bet, an incredible edge. Well, that's what life planning does. In life planning, we reduce the greatest risk that a client has to 0. We deliver to them the life that they're meant to live. And their energy, as a consequence, goes sky high. Goes sky high. Their vitality, their vigor, their engagement in the world, the rate of return on living goes way high as a consequence. So that's the value added, really, that we're talking about here in terms of your clients. And now I'm going to move to some statistics around this so that you get it more from a statistical standpoint. So one of the things that's really interesting is, this was from a Dow Jones survey, is that 75% of clients are not willing to recommend their wealth manager to friends or family or whatever, 75%. Now, I'm sure you get referrals. How many of your clients, is this true for you, that roughly, I mean, you might get a lot of referrals from some clients, but is it true that 75% of your clients are not willing to refer, are not likely to refer? Maybe, maybe not. But this is one of the, why would they not be willing to? Well, again, it comes back to this trust thing. You're still in the investment advice profession, after all, where the trust level is very low. And this is actually a problem in terms of building a great and sticky and powerful business. Another survey, this was from Prince & Associates, and this was a survey back when they did the survey. Life planning was called, they thought of life planning, they didn't know the term, and they used lifestyle planning. But, and distribution means a kind of a retirement-focused advisor, so a financial planner who's focused on retirement. That's distribution. And what this survey was about was in the example that they used, there was a company that was giving out $1 million, it was IRA rollovers, and it appeared in cash, and the client could do whatever they wanted with it. And so the question was, who got the money? And what happened was the investment manager got a very small portion, the financial planner got a little bit more, but the person who got the most money was the person who was really focused on the client's life, the life planning piece. You can see that. The statistics are quite stunning. But the thing that I love, I didn't put up here, they also did in this survey was embedded something about referrals. And in the survey, the investment manager got virtually no referrals from the hundreds of people that were studied in the survey. The typical retirement financial planner got 1 referral, and the life planner got 4 times that. So referrals are something that really are a fabulous thing. That's a major benefit of life planning. Let's look at more kind of detail on what we call the client relationship dividend. What are the other things that you get from this this way of doing business? I would argue that it's the most efficient way to do financial planning. And you might go, oh, wait a minute, George, I saw, you've got an EVOKE meeting, and then you've got a vision meeting, and then an obstacles meeting. I take care of all that in, just an hour. And you've got 3 meetings there. And that's true. That's true. But what happens is that it's efficient because when you actually design the plan, you know exactly what you're aiming at. Who was it? My aim is true. Who sang that? You know the song? Elvis Costello. Thank you. Elvis Costello. So the question is how do we get our aim to be true? And if it's not true, then we don't have efficiency in the plan. The client's going to surprise us. The client's going to leave at some point. They're going to be dissatisfied in some way. So I think of it as the most efficient way of doing financial planning. You get clients for life. The advisor income stream is automatic rather than constantly having to replenish business. Right now I know there's threats of robo-advisors, not just other advisors, but robo-advisors. Greater retention, fewer sales. One of the things that's very interesting that we've seen, and you've probably seen a lot of this because of the quality of the investment work that you all do. So I don't know where you are on the statistical realm here, but the percentage of assets under management that the brokers used to get from the clients were 15 to 45%. In life planning, and is this true for you as well? We would always get, I always got 100% of the assets. And the only time I didn't get 100% of the assets was when it was tied up in a trust or in some kind of pension system that I just couldn't get at. So basically, a life planner, again, why would the client split their assets? If you've actually shown that you care about their life and you're going to deliver that incredible life to them. The other thing is closing ratios. Again, I don't know what your statistics are, but the closing ratios of the life planners that I see are largely around 80%, and the best of them it's 100%. One of the reasons that those closing ratios move higher and higher is because of the referrals, because you're getting a lot more referrals, and the referrals are from people who know how you work, and how you work is so incredible because you listen in a way that nobody's listened to the client before. So the percentage of assets under management goes up toward the 100% realm. The closing ratio also goes toward 100%, 80 to 100%. And the other thing is, I don't know how rapidly you close, how much persuasion you need, but we don't use persuasion much. And we close in the first meeting, basically. And the reason that we close in the first meeting, the way that I used to do this closing was really very simple. I'd say, well, you don't need to sign the documents now. That was my close. And the client would say, oh no, I want to. I want to. I want to get the assets over. I want to get going. And the reason was because we listened, because we cared. We really heard, and we were delivering something extraordinary to them. So there's the closing happens in the first meeting. Occasionally, a client would wait until the very beginning of the second meeting, where they would bring in all the papers for the transfer of assets and all the rest. The other thing that's really interesting is you get referrals after the first meeting, just simply because the quality of the listening is so incredible. You get referrals after the first meeting. Let's come back for a moment to this trust issue, because we really are talking about a really pretty profound level of trust that you're reaching in life planning. Do any of you know Charlie Green? Have you heard of Charlie Green and the Trusted Advisors Network? Any of you know his work? Charlie's a wonderful, wonderful fellow, wonderful friend. And he put trustworthiness into a formula. So you're going to love this. I know you've got accounting in your background, as I did as well, and you do the numbers well. So he made trustworthiness a formula. And the formula goes like this. You might want to write it down because it's so cool. So trustworthiness equals, so T equals C for credibility. Okay, and that's something that you guys really have, credibility with what you do. And you believe in it, moreover, so people really feel that. Credibility plus reliability, and I'm sure everyone here strives to be really reliable, because that is obviously a trust factor as well. Credibility plus reliability plus intimacy. And that's one of the things that I think you can see that this listening quality that we add in life planning delivers, plus intimacy. And then what he does, he throws a kicker in there that's really unusual. He divides those three things, reliability plus credibility plus intimacy. He divides them by something he calls S, which is your self-orientation. And what he argues is that the higher, your kind of marquee, this is what I do, and look at all my stuff, and the higher your marquee, and this is part of that interrupting in the early part of the meeting and taking the meeting over. The higher your self-orientation is, the less trustworthy you are for the client, because you're not there for them. A great advisor has a tremendous degree of selflessness in their work. The next piece is that obviously this is transferable, it's trainable, it's scalable, and it's saleable, which is really quite wonderful, largely because it's a process that can be embedded in a firm and not just identified with a particular person that is doing the work. The sale value, we're all familiar with Mark Tubergen's work on the sale value of firms, and he talks about the sale value of a fee-only firm being 3 to 4 times the sale value of a commission-based firm, and he's got factors all the way through. We think, we don't have statistics on this, but we think that the sale value in a life planning firm will go up at least another multiple, because the reason that the fee-only firm has so much value, the underlying reason, again, is trust. It's both the reliability of the revenue, but that revenue reliability has to do with the trust factor with a client. And with life planning, you get an even higher trust level with the client. Finally, you get an energized client and a re-energized advisor. And I will just add, again, this piece coming from the Robo Challenge, that if you've got this kind of value where you're delivering a client into their dream of freedom, and you provide the architecture to make that happen, why would they ever leave you? So you're actually reducing that threat dramatically from the commoditization of wealth management. A couple more statistics, and then we're going to shift to the final part of the talk. This was a survey we did at Kinder Institute with people who had become registered life planner, as Tim has. And by the way, you probably know that I'm doing a breakout session after this, where Tim and 3 other registered life planners are going to be giving feedback, answering your questions. So one of the things we asked, satisfaction. And what we found was that we found deeper, longer lasting relationship with clients by 80%, made my business more satisfying, 83%. That's all wonderful and what we would expect. What I love is that it improved the quality of my own life by 88%, just implementing EVOKE. And you might go, well, how could that happen? What's that about? And what it's about is the notion that we have one of the kind of the phrases that we use in life planning is you can't be a life planner until you've been life planned. You can't be a life planner unless you're living your life plan. So one of the ways that we train, and this was one of the things that Tim was referring to earlier, we train people by bringing a dozen people together and pairing them up for 5 days. And you pair up with this person, you life plan them for 5 days, they life plan you with 3 or 4 trainers coaching you in front of a group. And it's all real. It's not play acting. It's not role playing. So what happens at the end of those 5 days is everybody is on fire about their life plan, just as a client would be. So, but they also have a strong business coming out of it. What I love about this is that if it's improving the quality of their own life, it means that in that way, it means that the quality of their client's life is likely to be increasing at the same percentage. So that's really, really a fantastic thing. So this life planning portion, I want to close this portion of this. We're still going to talk about life planning, but some deeper aspects and some wider aspects in a moment that I'm working on right now. That with this last slide of just what is the client proposition, and just to remind you of what it is, because it's pretty incredible. The client gets an experientially rich engagement right from the get-go. It's experientially rich for them. And all the way through, they get the conversation of a lifetime, but also it's the experience of a lifetime. Just really being told that they can live the dream that they've longed for all their life, or solve the problem that they've been wrestling with all their life. And we can do it in short order. Let's make it happen. We'll facilitate it. They also get a truly trusted advisor. This is an advisor who's doesn't just know the figures, but this is an advisor who they trust with anything in their life. A major transition comes up, they're there. They want you to be connected with them. So truly trusted advisor. Again, the client's most meaningful goals are articulated and soon to be accomplished. So there's the sense of energy and movement and transformation in their life. And finally, the solidity of that financial architecture is in place to make it all happen. That's a pretty incredible proposition that we're dealing with. So what I'd like to do as a closing, there's about a little over 10 minutes left, and I'd like to take you into some of the deeper realms that we do in the training, just very briefly, talk about mindfulness for a moment, and then talk about larger issues, as Bill was talking about them, civilization issues. As I mentioned earlier, all of this is about listening. So one of the questions that I've wrestled with for the longest time is, how do you train listening? And you can train it in dyads. You can have people facing each other and practice listening, and that's a very good way. What we found is that listening is well, first of all, the greatest financial planner is going to be a great listener. The greatest life planner is going to be a great listener. What we found is that the best of the life planners are also listening inside themselves in a particular way. That they do something that I used to call inner listening, and that now has been popularized with a huge number of scientific studies, is called mindfulness. So there's thousands of these studies on mindfulness. And I have something, the Map of Mindfulness is a subtitle of my new book, which is called A Golden Civilization. So we've taught mindfulness all along. And I wish we had time, we don't, but I do it frequently in my talks. I will have the whole audience, all of you, actually sit and do a mindfulness exercise. We don't have time for that. How many of you have done any kind of meditative or mindfulness practice? How many? Let's see. So a good number of you. So at least, it looks like at least half of you. How many of you are totally unfamiliar with what it is? Anybody? Yeah, okay. So I'll touch a little bit on what it is as well. So mindfulness is a meditative practice. Why it enhances listening is that it's a practice that aims at being in the present moment, at in fact a mastery of the present moment, which is a pretty extraordinary thing. I don't know if you know any of the studies on happiness, but probably the most profound study on happiness that has been done, in my opinion, was done by Daniel Gilbert and Matthew Killingsworth at Harvard. He's got the most popular course at Harvard for the last 20 years on happiness. And it's a study that shows that, we think that, gosh, just get me to Maui and the beach and the sunset. There, I'm going to relax, kick back, and really feel happy. As opposed to coming home after a long day at the office and you still have to prepare the meal and clean the dishes, right? And maybe take out the garbage. So you'd think, right, happy over here, not happy over here. That's not what Killingsworth and Gilbert found. What they found was that it had to do with moments. That if in the moment you were present and focused, the odds were very good that you were happy. If, on the other hand, you were distracted and your mind was wandering, the odds were very good that you were not happy. It's an incredible study. It's the study I think is called a wandering mind, or a distracted mind is an unhappy mind. It's just a page of description. It's a really wonderful study. So one of the ways that I think of this is freedom. It's what I think of happiness in this context as being moments of freedom. And one of the things that also that has not been adequately covered in science, I won't take us to gravitational physics, but I will take us to time and space for a moment. We have a map of time and space that's this oval. Let me show it up here so we'll actually see where I'm going with this and can ponder the map of mindfulness. So you see, we've got this oval of time and space, and that's the way we configure our whole life. We think about what we were doing in the past. If we're sitting down and we're going to attempt a mindfulness exercise, what we're going to do is we're going to close our eyes and we're going to attempt to come back again and again, usually to the breath, sometimes to sensations in the body, sometimes it's to a sound or something, but usually nowadays they teach it mostly with the breath, which is wonderful because it's just moments of sensation that are popping on and off, on and off, on and off. So you're constantly called back to the present moment. Those of you that have done the Do Mindfulness, is it easy to do? How many of you would say it's really easy to do? Maybe a few of you, maybe one or two. A minute ago, the whole room was raising its hand, and now one or two people are saying it's easy to do. And that's true. It's hard to do. And that's one of the reasons why a number of you have tried it and abandoned it. Right? How many of you have done that? Tried it a few times and yeah. So that's a popular thing. Well, the truth is that in that difficulty of doing it is where all the great stuff is happening. All right? So what you're doing is you keep coming back, you keep challenging the mind to come back to the present moment, to the present moment, to the present moment. And it keeps throwing you off to your to-do list, to the text messages, all these other things, and you keep bringing it back. So what are the qualities? What's happening there? What are the qualities that are being exercised? So one of the qualities is patience. So you're developing patience. Another quality that you're developing is focus. All of these are in scientific studies, so you can look at them. Some of the qualities that you don't realize you're developing is better health, is longer telomeres. You know what they are? They're a predictor of longevity. So the likelihood is that you live longer. There have been studies about intelligence measured with people taking SAT or GRE scores after a 6-week course in mindfulness. And their GRE scores go up by somewhere between 15 and 30%. So why is that happening? Because The difficulty that you run from in mindfulness is actually where the work is going on. And what you're doing is you're practicing being more alert, more present, more patient. You're practicing letting go of kind of your desires and aversions, your neurotic feelings about this or that. You're practicing being in the present moment. You're actually learning to accumulate more moments, to be here more, which from a life planner standpoint is fantastic, because it means that the clients can experience you as being a far better listener, which is great. So you can see in my map there, I've got that one of the things that develops is greater virtue. We keep coming down to the present moment, keep being bounced back to the time and space. But in fact, what we're doing is we're cultivating selflessness by letting go of all of our self-centered concerns. So there's just tremendous value. Your spouse is going to love you, all right, because you're there for them in ways that otherwise maybe you don't listen, or they feel that you don't listen. You're going to listen more, listen better. So I love this, and I love it for one other. I think of it as mastering the present moment. And that's a very exciting thing to do, to have more present moments in your life. But I also think that the other thing that I've been wrestling with and addressing in my latest book, my latest book is called A Golden Civilization and the Map of Mindfulness. And what I've been wrestling with in that book is all the problems that we seem to have in the world. And coming back in a way to Bill Nye's enthusiasm and optimism, which was great to see. One of the things that I wonder about is how is it, it's been 250 years since this explosion of innovation that started in the Industrial Revolution, 250 years. And we think of this period as being enormously entrepreneurial and innovative and all of that. Well, how come, I wonder, how come in that 250 years we haven't figured out something so that every one of these new hierarchies of power that arise, the Googles and the Apples and the Facebooks and all of that, how come we aren't seeing systematically wisdom, great hearts at the top of every hierarchy of power? How come we aren't seeing the best of our humanity? We're seeing clearly the best of our brains. It's incredible what we're seeing. But how come we're not seeing the best of our humanity? How come we still have corruption? Does corruption actually serve a valid purpose? So I've been wrestling with these questions, and also with the thought that maybe it's time, like a man getting the man to the moon, maybe it's time to solve all of these problems and do it in our generation. And so that's really what my book is about. And let me just do this final slide, and we'll end on this. So, and I'm traveling the world talking about these things. I just came back from Mumbai, where we were wrestling with issues of poverty. Come back from Hong Kong, where clearly the passion is for participative democracy. And I'm talking about democracy everywhere I go. Questions, just big questions. How do you scale wisdom? This issue of 250 years and we haven't developed it yet. How do we scale it? How come we haven't, cracked that nut? How do you scale wisdom? I think it's time. How can we most dramatically increase innovation and entrepreneurial energy across civilization and freedom? Freedom is very closely allied with our entrepreneurial energies inside of us. How can we dramatically increase innovation and entrepreneurial energy across civilization? How can we eliminate negative externalities forever from emerging technologies and all emerging systems and structures? It's time to end this distrust that we are now getting plagued with between each other, with the polarization. It's time to end all of this and to do it in a generation. I think it can be done. That's really what I'm interested in. It's time to recognize that cynicism is a disease and it doesn't help our vitality. We all have it. We love it at times. But it's one of the negative externalities, along with war and pollution and many other things. And then the final question is the one that I've really been addressing most of all. How can we establish a golden civilization? What would it look like? And within a generation, how can we do that? And my thought is, the answer, let's life plan civilization. You know, in life planning, we create a vision for the client. Let's do it for civilization. And as I said, I've wandered across the world. We've had conversations in, I think, 5 continents, in countries all over the world. Believe it or not, wherever you go, whether they're a free culture or a not free culture, whether they're poor, whether they're wealthy, their vision of a golden civilization matches very closely our vision of a golden civilization. So my notion is, in life planning, we create this incredible vision, and instead of it taking 10 or 15 years, we say, let's do it now. Let's do it in the next 6 months or so. So my vision is, let's do that with civilization. Let's create that great vision, and let's do it in a generation. So that's what I'm about this afternoon. I mean, the next, we have a little bit of a break, and the next meeting we're going to be having, I'm going to be doing a breakout where you'll see a demonstration of life planning and be able to ask registered life planners, how do they actually implement it in their business? What's the value for them? Thank you.